All right, welcome, Ray, to Unusual Attitudes. Thank you for joining me.
Great, it's great to be here.
Yeah,
Thanks,
we're here in Philly. Unusually
Philly.
warm March
I know.
in Philly,
It's
which
been beautiful.
has been really great for IM Phenom 2025. So my first question, same question I ask everyone, which is tell us who Ray Tavares is.
Yeah, Ray Tavares. So I lead our human capital solutions team for Truist Bank, based in Charlotte. Been in financial services for 30 years. Been in HR the last 20. Really all around tech that last 20. Blessed to have a great team of awesome solutions architects and practitioners looking to kind of game change the way we do HR. Excited about that every day. And I'm also a dad to 3 and a husband to 1. A great family that I have based all in Charlotte.
So tell me about your career progression. So, you've stayed in financial services in one form or another your entire career, which I don't know that that's that unusual, but
Sure.
Especially for people of our generation,
Yes.
right? So the Gen X, we tend to stick in our verticals.
Yeah.
But for your particular journey, you've seen that change where people are like interchangeable now in verticals, and you're in the human capital space and have been there for a while.
Yeah.
Tell me what it's like to observe these kinds of changes. I mean, what has been the most standout thing for you?
Oh, wow. I was actually thinking about this morning. I did the Rocky Run 2 days in a row. I was really excited to do it this morning after last night's festivities.
Right.
But I've benefited from great mentoring and counseling, and I didn't really even know it was happening, right? You just kind of pick up these little nuances kind of along the journey, and you take that and you kind of put that in your toolbox, right, your arsenal. And I've had the benefit of being kind of tapped on the shoulder for essentially 30 years of activity because of the skills that I have and I've picked up. So I'm passionate about that because I do feel like sometimes we, as leaders, and we're trying to get some stuff done fast, we kind of pigeonhole a little bit. I'm excited about kind of a skills evolution, really understanding what people are bringing to the table, their proficiency levels in certain skills. I started in a kind of tech learning space. I've worked with some great brands in my career, Bank of America for a chunk of years. You learn a lot along the way, but you have to be willing to kind of be objective with yourself and pick up, just some of those skills that you might be lacking or you haven't had exposure to if you're, young in the career, et cetera.
Yep. So as a leader, as we're moving in our careers, you get into these positions being at an executive level. What shifts for you in terms of what your career goals are? Because not saying you're coming to the end of anything, but
Sure.
you do reach, there's a little bit of a career ceiling where there's just nowhere else to go.
Yeah.
And you sort of look maybe back on that and say, well, my role is now changing. Instead of maybe a personal aspiration, I have different aspirations. So what are you aspiring to be or to do at this point?
Yeah, so I think the technology journey's been interesting, right? Because there's just been so much to it, and now it's moving so much faster. So that has kept me as a voracious learner of technology and how we improve kind of the operational setting. So I love what I'm seeing. The stuff that we talked about this week that was kind of rolled out with the agentic AI and the getting down to the use case level so we can see operational improvements. Instead of maybe 10 years ago, it was, we're just gonna slap new tech on it, right? And just hope for the best. That's evolving, which is really nice. I think for me, just kind of personally, I have realized that, I stepped out of the game, so to speak, and I was consulting independently for a little while, and I thoroughly enjoyed it. I loved kind of the strategic advice I was giving to clients at the time, but I really missed the people and helping to lead people and change. So I decided to kind of get back into it with Truist, and it's been a great journey for me. I've kind of really turned my focus into being more of a coach and really trying to think ahead of, what's going to kind of get us into trouble, so to speak, or letting my leaders know what's happening in terms of big bodies of work that we're doing, but I do focus a lot more on my teammates.
Yep. I think that's important in you're a parent,
Yes.
right? Tell us about your family.
Yeah, I've got 3 great kids, 2 boys and a girl. I've got 2 productive adults now, out of college, in the workforce, which is really interesting to kind of see and watch develop. They've got great stories, and I've listened, and I'm like, oh gosh, I've been there, or I've seen that happen. So it's been interesting. And my youngest is a senior in high school, so exciting time for us at our house. We're still waiting on some college admissions to come in, but he's got some great options for next year. So we'll see where he ends up.
Do you have conversations with your children about the world that you have grown up in and the change that you've seen? Like what advice are you giving to them as they enter a world where the speed of change is happening far faster than you and I experienced? And certainly we were far faster than our parents, but it is lightning fast.
Light years. Yes. No, you're absolutely great question. I'm laughing because sometimes I get the feedback from my kids to stop HRing them, but I mean it with great intention.
Turn it into a verb.
Yeah, they turn it into a verb, and I think for anybody listening who they understand what that means, and I try to coach them as well. It's as they mature and get older, it's less about kind of micromanaging, right, and kind of dictating. It's about talking to them as adults, young adults. We've seen the world, right? So we can kind of partake some of that knowledge, or some of the faux pas that we've had and we've learned from. So that's where I tend to go, and they listen. They come to me, they text me. I give a lot of on-the-fly advice to my daughter, who's now in the workforce as a marketing analyst. She's like, what about this? What about this? And I'm like, I'm happy to help.
Yeah. Yeah. So let's talk a little bit about how your parenting style might bleed into your leadership style. Mm-hmm. This is kind of where I always like to go with this one, because I can't leave being a father just at home. Some of those personality traits and some of the intention to just help, especially the younger generation around me as best I can. How does that play into how you lead your team?
Yeah, no, it's a great question. I'm definitely similar. I have a very supportive wife at home. She kind of gave up a career for me because of work and travel. I traveled extensively for a number of years, a lot to Europe. So, the kids were young. It was all on her for multiple days a week. So when I came home, I felt like I always had to rally around that, right? And be a good dad and be available. And I think that has matured over time, right? Because I love spending time with my family as a whole, or individually. It just depends on, kind of what situation comes up. I spend a lot of time on baseball fields. Still, that's kind of my decompression, is my family time. My family knows that I am one of those weird individuals who love to work. I'm not a workaholic. I've kind of reconciled that for myself. Like, I put a lot into my work, but I'm happy to leave. And I, turn the phone off or turn the computer off, and I shut it down.
Yeah. Yeah. So you work at Truist. Tell us about your journey to Truist.
Yeah, a great journey. Like I said, been in the HR tech space for 20 years now. It's kind of weird to say out loud, but a lot around big implementation events, as you could imagine, right? HCM platforms, et cetera. And then, when I had a conversation with our CHRO, she kind of described the job and the role that she wanted to see. And it was really the job I wanted that did not exist elsewhere. And it was really just being more holistic in the thinking around our entire HR tech stack and how we provide better experience for our employees, or we call them our teammates. So I was just drawn immediately. And that's kind of where we've been for 4 years, is targeting, the investments that we need, the improvements we need to make, including, bringing on Phenom. And for us, it was different because, I've been in banking for basically 30 years now, and you have a merger of that size right just before the pandemic, and two Southern banks coming together, gentleman's agreement. There's a lot of renewed passion and focus, and they decided to change the brand. So you've got kind of this startup mentality in the banking sphere, and you're a top 10 bank in the country. It's a different value proposition, right, and a different communication angle, if you will. So we've invested heavily on our culture and our purpose, and that is what fuels us every day. We talk about our purpose, mission, values, or our PMV every single day, and I see it inspire our teammates. It inspires me. So for us, it's how do we add value to the organization? Obviously, HR adds a ton of value from a technology perspective. Obviously, there's still a lot of noise in the system. We haven't figured all that stuff out as an industry yet. But I think we're going to get there, and we're probably going to get there faster now with agentic AI and just Gen AI capabilities.
Yeah, and Truist, I think you get a lot of recognition in Phenom client circles for what you've done from an employee experience and the skills, moving towards skills-based organization versus experience-based, or in addition to being experience-based.
Yeah.
Can you talk a little bit about why you recognized early on, because you were an early adopter of that methodology, why you knew that was the right direction to go for Truist?
So when I joined, in the midst of kind of that branding change, right, and that profile change, if you will, I think one of the things that I brought with me was just a real passion for managing the tech stack effectively and efficiently. I wasn't seeing that with what we had. I've got great talent partners internally. We connect very well. We have really open dialogue, and we just decided to raise that as kind of number one priority for us coming out of the merger and really expanding the brand awareness. We really needed to invest in that. And we found Phenom, which was a company that I was familiar with for a number of years. And there's lots of great technology there, but you've got to have the right fit for you. And I think Phenom was for us. And kind of working through the roadmap, right, was really important for us. Where did we want to focus first? Our chief talent officer, she's wonderful. She really wanted to delve in deep on internal mobility, brand awareness, and actually recruiter accountability. Like, you can throw tools all day long, but you need the adoption. So those three areas of focus for us were kind of paramount. And we did them all at the same time. We invested heavy in kind of the change management aspect of it. And it's really paid off. I think I was impressed from a, call it manual perspective. We had great internal mobility right from the start. But it was just putting the power of a platform around that and an experience build has just been really good. It's been fun to watch. I think the transparency level that we have internally, we share the job descriptions, we share job grades. We can even tell you, people that are in those roles, so you can actively look for mentoring or just have conversations with people. So that's been, again, exciting to watch.
So all the technological changes that you are witnessing, the past few years that we've worked together, and what you saw here, what is your biggest concern?
I think like everybody else, it's just maneuvering the governance process. And, we've been on an educational journey, I'd say, for 2 years around what does this start to look like, right? How are we going to effectively have oversight and governance across these models? What really kind of gives me, I'm a tech nerd, but it's the going down to that operational level where it's not just kind of flashiness anymore, right? You're really impacting operational process and the practitioners, right? So, and then if you can do that and you can show that there's a human in the loop, right? The AI is not making decisions. It's really just kind of streamlining the flow of the work. That's a game changer. So I'm excited to see kind of how fast we're here. I was actually just talking to somebody. I think the conversation was different about a year and a half ago, right? We weren't really talking about agentic AI. It was Gen AI, and it was kind of going to infiltrate the platforms, if you will. And yes, it's done that, but now it's down to like a use case level. And I think we're going to just see more of that explode in the market.
Yep. So where do you think all this technology is going? And the big conversation that I've been having with a lot of executives like yourself, and I don't think it's an unusual conversation at this point, maybe a year ago it was, is we're making claims, right, that we're going to save people a lot of time. What's the value for the individual to use those technologies as compared to what I do with the time I'm saving? So specifically, what are they doing with the time that they're saving?
Yes.
At Truist.
Yes. I think Mahi said this yesterday, and it kind of resonated with me, probably with many people, but we are trying to streamline the work, right, to absorb more work. And I think that's a valuable concept, right? Because I think there are people who view this as the easy button, right? And that's the wrong approach, right? Like, you want to add more value to your companies. You want to be more indispensable, right? You want to leverage the technology that your companies are giving you, so you can go do more with it, right? And obviously, for the recruiters on the acquisition side, super important, right? Because they're getting pulled from multiple angles. We heard yesterday, just some of the stats around how fast the business strategies are changing and how HR is a laggard because, they don't get the right investment types, they don't have enough people, all those excuses, if you will. But it's truth, it's reality, right? And I think recruiters feel that pinch, and then you throw technology at them and it's just like timeout. So you really have to, I feel like you have to invest heavy on that change management, get them on board. That adoption is going to be key for them, I think, especially now as we go into this kind of new age where the skills are going to change and evolve rapidly as well.
Yep. So you and I were on a panel yesterday or day before. I forget, it's been so long now, right? It's been a great long week,
Yes.
right? And we were talking about governance, right? I think the audience would be really interested to walk through the process of governance, and I would start with this question: where was governance 3 or 5 years ago, right? And maybe tell that journey a little bit in detail of how governance has grown for you.
Yes. Yeah, I think governance was certainly a lot more traditional, but it was manageable, right? You kind of had a understanding of the process, who you needed to speak to, stakeholders you needed to engage. And yeah, maybe this process was cumbersome depending on the place you were at, but it was, more palatable.
Yep.
And now I think with the technology moving so fast, and especially if you work for a large company, it's evolving like almost daily, right? You've got new people coming into the mix, new groups coming into the mix. You really have to kind of educate that audience better around the technology that you want to use. Especially when it involves AI. And that's just been an interesting evolution. I was saying the other day, you really need just a broader partnership now, way more than you used to. Like, I think before I was always tight with my tech partners and legal compliance risk. But now you have to really understand, okay, who's driving some of these AI decisions for your company? What about the data, right? Data is something that I think HR does pretty well, but we have to do much better now moving forward because you're talking way more than just kind of the core HR platform that you're on. To get truly kind of predictive information out and leverageable, you have to put more data from different platforms in there. So it's been different conversations, and now that governance grows every time you kind of add a a new layer.
Yeah. So when you're planning to look at a new technology purchase or adding on to something that you have, how are you engaging your governance committee, your board, in that process?
Yeah, so for us, we obviously talk internally first from an HR perspective to see if it's really going to add the value that we think it will, right, or we want it to. And we'll start to kind of canvas the landscape, so to speak. And then we pull folks in early. When we get to kind of call it the RFI, RFP level, we want folks engaged. We want them to know what's going on. We're very forthcoming in terms of, call it the roadmap and the planning. And, they're in the boat with us. Like, that's almost kind of like the easy part. It's the additional folks and groups that you really need to kind of bring in with you over time. And that's been new, right? Because they don't focus on HR all day like I do, right? So you have to really kind of break it down and make them understand what's going on, the platform, the intent, et cetera.
And you bring up another really good point, which is sort of the transformation of HR as an entity inside the organization. I think it used to be more of a risk-reward kind of organization, the reward being we're going to give you the job, we're going to give you the promotion.
Yeah.
The risk is maybe we need to manage somebody's performance and maybe they're not doing so well. We need to make some people changes in the org. But, tell us about the role of HR has expanded way, way beyond that. Tell me about some of the influences now that exist for the human resources organization that didn't exist 10 or 20 years ago when you came into it.
Yeah, sure. I think we've seen kind of that strategic HR evolution happen, right? To your point, Cliff, I think 20 years ago, you were kind of an order taker, so to speak, in HR. You had to support some of those major objectives for a business, org changes, et cetera. Now we are bringing data from our platforms, right? And we're having different conversations. And we're bringing in, data points that leaders need to consider more, right? And then leaders come to us about some of the stuff that they will also want to pull off as well. I think what was, it's been kind of interesting the last year and a half, too, coming out of the pandemic, is just the return to office concept. Well, that's HR data. That is, we're tying in with our real estate folks, and just kind of providing a bigger picture of what's going on across the enterprise. But 20 years ago, that conversation's not happening. Obviously, the event didn't happen in the first place, but it was just different, right? You probably used to do reporting on, occupancy a different way, and now HR is right there at the table and pretty much driving some of that reporting out. So I think that's some of the, call it the value shift that we've seen for HR.
I've asked this question to a number of people, so I'd be interested to get your response. It shouldn't even be called HR anymore, honestly.
Yeah.
If you think about what HR is being asked to do now, which is, not just manage the people in the organization, but manage some of these technologies. Applied AI, agentic AI is almost creating a persona of a worker.
Yeah.
And now you're managing that. So human resources doesn't really, the title doesn't match anymore. It doesn't describe the depth of the work and the influence of the organization that HR has. What do we call HR now? Is it time to rethink? I'm not big on naming things, but I do think labeling some things is important for people to understand the role that is played in the organization. And with this expanded role, is it time to rethink what we call ourselves?
I think it's a great question. I would agree with you. We've actually done that, but if you look across kind of the landscape, I think you'll see, in the C-suite, there are leaders that are responsible for HR that are also doing other things, right? Whether it's marketing or they've just kind of been renamed as a kind of people or experience. I've even seen kind of traditional HR with revenue, because you're kind of tying in the data, right, and all these conversations. So I think we're there. I think probably the lag is just some of the operational processes that we haven't addressed, right? So if we can get things like, truly seamless tier 0 experience for people to get kind of their HR actions taken care of, that's a step in the right direction. Employee relations is another one that probably never goes away, but it probably evolves even more so over time. So I think it's just things like that that are maybe stay in kind of the traditional camp, but I think going forward, experience and producing or being able to produce maybe better productivity for the company, I think is probably where we're headed.
So it's funny you say that, because what goes through my head and the response that I've been giving to some folks when they say, well, what would you call it? I would look at that top level role, the chief role, and call it the chief productivity officer, actually, because I think that's what is going to drive organizations when you have these hybrid organizations. You get humans and technology pairing together to deliver for the business. It is about how do you make them both productive. And I think that's really important. So I think, kind of wrap up here, as you look back on your career and the things that you're really successful with and the things that you clearly made mistakes and learned from, but what is your advice for executives in the talent space, and especially talent technology, as this landscape just changes so rapidly? What is your advice to them?
I think it's three things. It's really to keep learning, because the technology is changing. You're not going to be able to keep up, but at least keep learning as much as you can, and just kind of stay current. Second thing is be really transparent. I think transparency helps build trust in people. So if you can kind of establish that with key stakeholders and partners, and they know that you're advocating for the company and the greater good, I think that's a significant help. And then empathy. I think everybody is going through something, and you might not know what it is, but you got to be aware that it's out there. So that's kind of the coach in me. There's always something, there's always a challenge or a situation, and I try not to pass judgment, right? It's just understanding what's going on and being empathetic and lending an ear or just being supportive.
Empathy will not be replaced by technology. That's
Definitely
a human
not.
trait. So Ray, Tavares, thanks for spending some time with us.
Thank you, Cliff. Appreciate the time.